Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 40.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cash Car Convert Podcast. My name is James Kinson and I am the Cash Car Convert. And this is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. Well, it's been another 2-week period since I recorded. You may be wondering what's been going on. It turns out there has been quite a bit going on. My wife and I spent 4 days in Cleveland last week. Her grandfather passed away and we went up for the wake and the funeral and we spent time with her extended family. Her grandfather had 12 children, and I believe the number was 36 grandchildren, about 37 great-grandchildren, and I think 2 great-great-grandchildren at the time of his passing. Having gone to this funeral, it made me think about legacy and what my legacy would be, and started thinking about what my listeners' legacies would be. And there was another thing that's coming up that also made me think about my own legacy, and that is my oldest son. He and his wife are expecting their first child, and they just got a scheduled date to go in and have the baby cesarean section because the baby is so large that they're concerned that if they don't take it that way, then there could be some complications. So Cole Michael Kinson is scheduled to be born on August 27th. So I'll be a grandfather for the first time. And between the death of my wife's grandfather and me about to become a grandfather, it really did make me think a lot about my own legacy, and again, by extension, the legacy of my listeners. You know, we all, we start our lives pretty full of hope that we're going to be able to do something different in the world, and maybe life beats us down, or maybe it doesn't, but we wind up in a place and we look back, especially when you get to be my age, where you look back on your life and you kind of question some of the choices you made and where you could have made better decisions and the way things might be better. I know that in reality, there's not a lot of benefit to looking back like that. You can't go back and undo things. You can't clean up your mistakes. You can learn from them, however. I am a firm believer in the fact that if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. So there is a benefit from that fact. But, I don't dwell on it, and I wouldn't tell you to do that. In fact, that's something I've had to recover from, is feeling like there were some things that happened in my life that were just, too bad and that I couldn't recover from them. And I've since reconciled that and feel like through Jesus and through God, I've been able to reconcile that, and I am at peace with the things that have happened in my past, and I feel like I can move forward with a clean slate. But that doesn't stop me from thinking about the legacy I'm leaving to my family. I have a young daughter. I've got 2 grown sons. I've got a wife that I love very much. How am I going to leave them? What legacy am I going to leave? And, probably 5 or 6 years ago, I wasn't thinking about that very much. I thought when I retired from my job, I would probably spend my days playing golf or tennis, and that that would be the way I would try to spend my later years, and really just enjoying myself in that way. And it's not that golf and tennis aren't fun things to do for me. I enjoy those sports very much, and I get a lot out of each of them. But I got to tell you, I really enjoy talking to people about their car situations. I enjoy doing this podcast and getting an opportunity to help people. I enjoy hearing from people who've told me that they've made decisions and changed their behavior based on what I'm doing. And I can't imagine not doing it now. It just feels so natural for me to do this. Just my small little show has had a pretty big impact on a number of people. And really, if it just had an impact on one, that would make it worthwhile. But I've had a lot more than that speak to me about this. And I don't think I've shared it on this show before, but I really have this long-term dream that I'm going to start a revolution around cash cars, that this is really going to catch on, that more people are going to listen to my show, and I'm going to have more people come up and tell me that, I didn't know I needed to hear this until I heard it. That seems to be the thing I hear most from people, is that they just didn't realize what they didn't know. And I was in that same boat. I was raised to believe that I would always have auto debt and that there wasn't really a way out of it. And, I really owe Dave Ramsey and Larry Winget and some other financial authors that helped turn my head around on that thing. Thomas Stanley, for sure, was one of those. It gave me a different perspective. And I realized that people who look rich really aren't always rich. And in a lot of cases, they're just pretending to be rich and driving cars they really can't afford, and wearing clothes they can't afford, and wearing watches that they bought on credit, and maybe even eating meals that they bought with a credit card. I don't want that to be the norm in this country or in the world. And I want to start to change that. I believe what I'm doing here is going to start a revolution, that there are going to be more and more people who are going to buy into the idea of buying cash cars and cars they can truly afford, cars that they have the money in the bank to buy. And it's going to start to change people's lives. And that I'm going to wind up being on news programs and being interviewed about that. And the message is going to spread further and further. So I'm hoping and believing that will be a legacy that I have, not just to my family, but to others out there. I really feel like this is something I'm called to do. And, I'd really like to do a TED Talk someday. It's really crazy because I've gone from somebody who used to look at what I'm trying to accomplish and my mission, and I used to almost be ashamed to talk about it because I just felt like it wasn't a worthy enough goal. And I had some people much smarter than me help me understand how much of a difference I could make in people's lives if I could get them to drive cars they truly could afford and not to overindulge and drive a car based on ego. And it really, it opened my eyes, and it made me realize that I do have an idea worth spreading, which is what TED Talks are all about. And I really would love the opportunity to speak to a TED audience about this message and again, claim another level of exposure to get my message out. I'm really thankful to Jared Easley, Dan Franks, Gary Leland, and Mitch Todd. Those are the founders of the Podcast Movement Conference. I attended that last weekend, and I was on a panel where I was the moderator, and the panel was about getting great guests. And that's a really important topic for me. I love getting good guests on my show. Even though I've done a lot of solo shows of late, I'm going to have some guests coming on here in the not too distant future. So I'm really looking forward to having some really top quality people on, and I think you'll enjoy hearing those folks when I get them on. As much as I enjoy getting guests on, and as much as I like hanging out with podcasters and talking about podcasting, it's something I'm very passionate about. What I really liked is that it gave me a platform to have exposure to new people. There are people at that conference who never knew about my podcast prior to attending. They didn't know who I was. And there's a whole nother set of people now who know about me and what I'm doing. And I just hope that my message will resonate with them, and that they'll become listeners, and that someday they'll come up to me and say, gosh, I didn't know I needed this message until I heard it. So that's enough about that and legacy. But that's the kind of legacy I'm looking to leave. And I would challenge you to, sit down and think a little while about your legacy with your family. What do you want it to be? And what kinds of things can you do to change your behavior? Assuming you need to, right? You're listening to the show. Maybe you're already a cash car convert and you've got your life financially in order. I would just challenge you to sit down and think about your legacy. And if there's things you need to do to improve, put some plans in place to do that. I had to put plans in place to start this podcast and to get it going. And it's a labor of love for me. And it's really allowed me to meet a lot of really terrific and amazing people. And I can't believe my journey is really, my podcasting journey is only about 8 months old, but my blogging journey, my website has been around now for a year. And I can't believe how much my life has changed in 1 year. in terms of the people I've met and the things that I've experienced. And so I'm going to tell you that you can have similar kinds of changes in your life if you set goals and you plan accordingly. You can certainly change your life. I want to tell a story. I was in church 2 weeks ago, and Pastor Robert Morris at Gateway was telling the story of Esau. Now, if you're not a Christian, don't tune out here, because the story is valuable regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. Esau was the oldest son of Isaac. And so this is pretty early on in the Bible. This is in Genesis. And Esau comes in from hunting one day, and he's famished. And his younger brother, Jacob, had cooked some stew. And Esau asked his brother for some food. And Jacob said to Esau, I will give you some stew, but I want you to give me your birthright. Now, that doesn't mean much to us these days, but in those times, the oldest son got a double portion of the inheritance. And so basically what Jacob was doing was saying, I want you to trade your double portion of inheritance for a single portion of inheritance for a bowl of soup, of stew. And Esau was so hungry that he basically said, look, I'm so hungry, I'm about to die. And if I die, what good is my birthright? So you can have it. And so Jacob made him swear, and Esau did. And so Esau gave up his birthright, his double share of inheritance, for a bowl of soup. And the closing verse of that story is, thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, you may be thinking, well, what does that have to do with me? And, how is that even relevant in today's world? Well, yeah, inheritance, things are divvied up much differently these days. So I'm not really talking about that. What I'm talking about is people trading their future for something today. They're trading something in the future that's more valuable for something today that's much less valuable. So Esau traded his birthright for a bowl of stew. And what I believe, and I think the numbers bear it out, is that when people buy on credit, whether it's a car or a suit or dinner or vacation, they're doing the same thing. They're trading something today for something that would be much more valuable in the future. So, it's partially all about deferred gratification, but it's also about your mindset. If Esau was thinking long term, he would have realized he wasn't really going to starve to death in that moment. He might have been hungry, famished, and that may have very well been true. But, did he really need to trade his birthright for that? And what I want to compare that to is when you buy a new car or even a used car with debt, you're trading some portion of your future away. And I don't think unless you've done the math on it, you really realize how much of your future you're trading away. So I would really encourage you to get a calculator, take the car payments that you have right now, multiply them out over, the next 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, you know where you are in your life and how much longer you're likely to have car payments. But, if you're 35 and let's say you're planning to retire when you're 65, let's say you're going to have car payments for the next 30 years. If you're 25, let's say 40. Let's do the math on that and let's take a look at how much money your car is really costing you over the course of your life. And that's before you put any interest on it and assume some rate of return that would cause it to even grow and compound much more. So my message here is don't trade your tomorrow for today. You can afford to drive something, put your ego in check, and drive something that's a little less fancy, has a few less bells and whistles, and then think long term. Think long term about your family. Think long term about yourself. There's lots of things this could be applied to, but right now I'm just talking about finances. Don't trade your tomorrow for today. Work today to build your tomorrow. That's what I would like to see you do. I would like to see you invest in yourself and build a brighter tomorrow for you and your family. And then you can be a man or a woman who leaves a legacy to your family. Maybe you've made mistakes. Maybe you don't think you're worthy. Well, I'm going to tell you, I could say those same things. And if I did, I wouldn't be doing this podcast right now. Hopefully you're enjoying this podcast and you appreciate that I was able to put, my past in check I was able to put my ego in check around the vehicle that I drive and to make the changes necessary to be able to drive a cash car and to tell my story, hopefully, benefit some people with it. Next, I want to talk about the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. My brother challenged me the other day, and so I did go out and take the Ice Bucket Challenge. You can go out to cashcarconvert.com, and you can find the video of me taking the plunge, as it were. Actually, I wasn't taking the plunge. I was just pouring it over my head, and I can tell you it was very cold. But, a couple of things happened out of that. One of them is I hadn't really thought much about ALS. I mean, I know it exists as a disease. I know that it's called Lou Gehrig's disease. I know it's one of those insidious diseases that takes people and really, it doesn't just take their life, it takes their quality of life first. And so they suffer through 2 to 5 years of watching their life deteriorate in front of them until they're no longer in their life. And so I watched a couple of videos about that, and that helped me decide that I wanted to do the challenge. So I did do the challenge, and I also made a donation, and I was planning to do that anyway, but one of the gentlemen that I challenged shared with me that he wasn't going to be able to take the challenge because he was traveling, but that his father had passed away from ALS, and he would more than happily make the $100 donation. I was very moved by that. I didn't choose this person because I thought, that ALS had impacted them. The 3 people I chose, I really chose them because I thought they had good senses of humor and good attitudes and wouldn't mind taking such a challenge. But also, I thought that they could share this information with their broader audience. All of them are podcasters, so I did have a little strategy in my challenges, and that I wanted to try to get people who I thought might have a broader reach and could get the message out there a little more. Because when I thought about ALS and I checked into it a little more, I really did feel like it was a worthy cause. And I know there are a lot of them out there. My dad died of prostate cancer, so I certainly think that's a cause that's near and dear to me and is always important. My sister had ovarian cancer and was given 6 months to live and is still with us now, many years later. And so that's a cause that's near and dear to me. I've had asthma my whole life, so lung issues are an issue that's near and dear to me. But this ALS challenge, I really appreciate the brilliance of their marketing, but I also appreciate the importance of finding a cure. So I know there's been a lot of money raised because of this Ice Bucket Challenge, and I know some people don't like the challenge. I know some people don't think it's appropriate, and I appreciate that. I'm not throwing any stones at people who think that way. This was something I felt really good about doing, and I hope you listening would consider doing it. If you don't want to do the challenge, certainly think about making a donation. I think it is a very worthwhile cause. And again, you can go out to my website and watch the video of me pouring it was probably about 3 gallons of water. It was a 5-gallon bucket, and it was probably 3/4 full, and it had a 10-pound bag of ice in it as well. So it was cold. I'll just leave it at that. The last thing I want to talk about here today is, we're always talking about the cost of vehicles, and I'm always talking about depreciation and all those kinds of things. And I thought it might make sense for me to talk about my own vehicle and kind of relay the information about what it's cost me to drive it and so forth. And you'll probably get a kick out of this, but I would have sworn that I had this vehicle for 4 years. I thought I got it right after my daughter was born, but no, I was wrong. I got it when she was about 14 months old. So I've actually only had the car a little over 3 years. I bought it May 31st of 2011. And as I'm recording this, obviously it's in August of 2014. So I thought it would be worthwhile to share this information and again, just kind of get the costs out there and maybe help dispel some of the myths that people have around what it costs to own a used vehicle. And again, in this case, I paid cash, so I'll run through the numbers here for acquisition. The vehicle that I bought was $13,895, and this was a 2006 Ford F-150. My taxes on it were $897, and registration and other various fees worked out to be $165. So my total cost to buy the vehicle was $14,957. I went back and I looked at all the repairs, maintenance, anything I had replaced on the vehicle, and I ran the numbers on that over the last 3 years. And what I came up with was $2,944. Now, again, this is oil changes. This is, I bought new tires for the vehicle, so that was about $800 of it. I replaced the brakes myself, but I replaced a lot of the mechanicals of the brakes, so that was about $400. And so you can see about $1,200 of that $2,900 were just tires and brakes, which all cars are going to need at some point if you own them long enough. It's pretty standard maintenance stuff. Oil changes I had in here, and I'll be the first to admit, I'm pretty good about changing the oil in my vehicles, and I use the high mileage oil, which is more expensive, and I have them replace other things like air filters and other fluids when they're due, those kinds of things. So my oil changes were pretty expensive. Most of them were over $100, and so that adds up after a while. This includes registration fees, which on my vehicle in Texas is about $67 to $68. And then I also have an annual inspection that's due, and that costs about $40. So those are most of the kinds of things that I bought. I did have to buy a second key when I got my vehicle. It only came with one. So I did buy a second vehicle, and that was about $150 because it's an electronic kind of a key, and it had some coding that had to go into it, and I had to get it from the dealership. So they kind of had me there. And then I also bought some floor mats from the dealer that I didn't really have to do. The only floor mat that was kind of worn was the driver's, but they only sell them in sets. So I went ahead and bought a whole set because I wanted my truck to look good. So some of these things I could have avoided had I chosen to, but I thought it was important to have a vehicle that looks good and that I enjoy driving. So the $2,944, that's what I wound up with in terms of just maintenance, fees, registrations, and those kinds of things that are pretty typical of most vehicles. Now, when I add gasoline into this is a Ford F-150, and it averages about 15 miles to the gallon overall, and so gasoline for me was pretty expensive, and it worked out to be another $9,826. So maintenance plus gas worked out to be $12,770 for 3 years. So my total cost to own this vehicle, including the acquisition, works out to be $27,727. And I've spent that in 3 years. Now, the biggest chunks of that were the acquisition cost, which was $14,957, and gasoline, which was $9,826. The maintenance aspect of it, which is the piece that I wanted to really highlight for this show, was very negligible in that cost model. Buying the tires and buying the brakes were the most expensive things that I did for this vehicle, and it accounts for $1,200 of the $2,900. So I feel really good about what I've spent on the vehicle. And I guess the other thing I would say, and I didn't go check this out, but the last time I did, and it hasn't been that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 months, my vehicle would still sell for pretty close to what I bought it for, probably within $1,000. And I've put right at 44,000 miles on my vehicle in 3 years. So I've put 44,000 miles on it, and I can sell it for very nearly what I paid for it. So I think that's a really good deal. And I hope that you listeners out there will hear this and realize that you can drive a vehicle that's used and not necessarily have just a ton of maintenance on it. And again, I've done the maintenance that I needed to do. I did change the tires out. I'm a big believer in having good tires. I don't like the idea of driving on bad tires. I don't think that's a very smart thing to do, especially not when you got a family and you're concerned about their safety. And brakes fall into the same category, right? I want to have good brakes. I want to have good ability to stop. So all of those things are very important to me. So I feel, again, really good about this, roughly $3,000 over 3 years in maintenance. And I think since a lot of it was oil changes and those kinds of things, I think most people would have pretty close to that amount of maintenance anyway. If you had a newer vehicle, maybe you wouldn't have to do tires in the first 3 years or the brakes in the first 3 years. I think the rest of them, it would be pretty comparable. So just food for thought for you guys out there, and just a little proof point to show that you can drive a cash vehicle and not have it cost you an arm and a leg. Now, the other thing you might be thinking is, well, yeah, but you spent, almost $14,000 on this vehicle. And that's true. I did. But I believe using my techniques and patience on the part of the buyer, you yourself can also find a really good vehicle and one that will run just as well for you. I've certainly done that before myself. I've had some vehicles I bought for much less money that were just as reliable and just as good for me. So again, hopefully this will be a little proof point for you guys. I just want to give you something to think about out there, and I hope you appreciated that. I fully expect, as I own this vehicle in another year, that these numbers will stay very similar. And and if you were to average it out over the years, then certainly the cost per year would be going down significantly as the years progress here. The cost to own in the $27,727 over 3 years is much more than if you assume that I spend another $3,000 on gas and another $1,000 on maintenance, then that's going to add another $4,000 to that total. So I'd be at $31,000 over 4 years, and that averages out to much less per year. So I hope you've enjoyed that bit of information. I thought it would be something valuable. That, again, just kind of a proof point. I just think I hear so many people talk about the idea that if you buy a used car, you're buying somebody else's trouble, or especially if you buy an older car, you're buying somebody else's trouble, or if you buy a car with over 100,000 miles on it, you're buying somebody else's trouble. And I guess this is a good point in the show to bring up, that when I bought my vehicle, it had 109,000 miles on it, so it now has 153,000 miles on it. I'm just as confident in driving it today as I was when I bought it. So there you go. Trying to think if there's anything else I need to talk about this week. I guess the only other thing I would say is I want to go back and touch on the podcast movement. The panel that I was on had just some really great people on it, so I do want to take a moment and just mention them. One of them was Christina Canters. One of them is Ellory Wells, who's a friend of mine, and I've been on his show. Veron Ross was on the panel, and Chris Cerrone. And each of these folks have their own show, and they're all doing very well in their respective podcast areas. In closing, just a reminder that I'll be in New Orleans September 18th through the 20th at the New Orleans Marriott, and that is for FinCon Expo 2014, where I'll be speaking on a panel to discuss why you should podcast. And I think there's lots of reasons, but I'm really looking forward to getting an opportunity to meet up with some of the financial bloggers that are there and give them some encouragement to have a podcast and to be able to reach their audience in a new way. I know for me, it's worked out much better when I was just blogging. I didn't get as much interaction from my audience. I didn't have as much of an audience. But once I started podcasting, and I think people could not just read my words, but hear my voice and my sincerity and in the message that I'm trying to deliver, it seemed to help me get the word out a little more and helped my message resonate with my listeners. So I'm very thankful for that. So if you're going to be in New Orleans September 18th through the 20th, if you're going to be at FinCon in particular, I would love to see you. But if you're just in the New Orleans area, please reach out to me. Come by the hotel. Be happy to meet with you, maybe have lunch or dinner. Most of these conferences are pretty packed and pretty busy, but I sure would love to meet any listeners that are in that area. Please feel free to do that. It would be my honor. With that, I'm going to call this show done. I'm going to encourage you to go out and subscribe to the Cash Car Convert podcast in iTunes or Stitcher. I would also encourage you to go out and leave a rating and review. I have 45 U.S. reviews. I have 1 international review and rating. So we're getting closer to the 50 mark. And amazingly, I didn't have any new ratings and reviews since my last show, and it kind of surprised me. I thought getting close to 50, some people would want to get their name in the ring, so to speak, to win the Smart Money, Smart Kids book by Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz. But that didn't appear to be the case. So hopefully that'll happen here in the next week or so, and we'll get those additional ratings and reviews in, and then I'll pull a name, and we'll be giving away that book to a lucky rating and review listener. And again, for those who might be new to the show, this book is an autographed copy of the Smart Money, Smart Kids book. Both Dave Ramsey and Rachel Cruz signed the book. So hopefully that'll be a little more motivation than, maybe you enjoy the show, but, it is kind of a hassle to go out. But I'm going to try to make it a little easier for you. All you have to do is go out to cashcarconvert.com/iTunes, and that'll take you to my show page. And there you can click and link into iTunes, and it'll allow you to leave a rating and review. So it's a relatively painless process. You can give 1 to 5 stars, and then you can leave a review. Give me any feedback, positive or negative, about the show. And I'd really appreciate honest feedback. I try to do the best I can to put out a good show that's going to have some relevance to my listeners. But if you've got some ideas about how I can make this show better, I'm more than happy to hear them. I want to thank you again for listening. I couldn't do a show if I didn't have an audience, so I thank you guys for listening. It means a lot that you take the time to do so. So thank you. Have a great week, and God bless. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. I want to reward that by sharing with you the names of the 3 people that I challenged in my ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. The first person was Ellory Wells from the Empowered Podcast. Next, I challenged Stewart from Money Plan SOS. And last, I challenged Jared Easley of Starve the Doubts. And so the Empowered Podcast, Money Plan SOS, and Starve the Doubts are the names of their podcasts. They're all really good. I would encourage you to go out and give them a listen. I think you'll certainly enjoy them. The names sort of tell the stories, but let me just say, Ellory's podcast is about empowerment and helping people be empowered to take control of their life and to better themselves. He's had some really great guests on, and I've really enjoyed listening to his show. Money Plan SOS is a podcast that is, much as it sounds, it's about helping you when you need help with your money, right? When you're ready to send out an SOS, Steve's got the answer, and he's going to help you out. And he's got a really compassionate heart for helping people get out of their money issues. And his tagline is, pay attention, not interest. And I think that's a really great point. If you pay attention to what's going on in your life, you'll be a lot less likely to go out and buy something on credit and therefore be paying interest. So definitely wanted to talk about Steve's podcast. Last is Jared Easley's podcast, Starve the Doubts. And the Starve the Doubts podcast is much as it sounds. Again, it's about helping people push past the doubts that they have. We all have them. When I started my podcast, I had lots of doubts about my ability to get behind a mic and to talk to people about what I'm passionate about. And the funny thing is, there's all kinds of challenges with it. It's not just getting behind a mic and getting over the fear of that. It's getting over hearing the sound of your own voice. It just sounds so much different than when you speak regularly. You don't hear the way you sound to everybody else. And so it takes a while to get over that. But that's just one of the doubts and one of the fears that you have to overcome. But Jared's show is very entertaining, and he's had some really, really great guests on as well. And I think you'll enjoy all 3 of those shows. I'm also going to add that I have been on all 3 as a guest. So just a little plug for me as well while I'm closing the show here. So thank you again for listening. Have a great week, and may God bless everything you're doing.